Hey, all right. Yay.
You're connected now?
Yes, we are. And also, we're live. So,
Okay, well, hang on. We got to fix our phones. Hang on.
okay, great. Everybody just stand by here. Let me go ahead and read you their bios while she's setting up that phone line there. And of course, my special guest this evening is Laura Cortner and Robert Hieronimus, Ph.D. Robert Hieronimus, Ph.D., is an internationally known historian, visual artist, and radio host, and has appeared on History, Discovery, BBC, and National Geographic. The host of 21 Century Radio, he lives in Maryland, and Laura E. Cortner has co-authored previous titles with Robert Hieronimus, including Founding Fathers, Secret Societies, and United Symbolism of America. Her work appears regularly in periodicals like UFO Magazine, FATE Magazine, and several Beatles publications. She's the director of Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center and lives in Maryland. And their website is secretlifeofladyliberty.com. And are you with me?
Yay, we're here.
Yes, we are
Hey,
here.
hello. It's wonderful to meet both of you.
Well,
Thank you for having us.
And you sound great. And I finally got you here, so thank goodness. I'll tell you what.
Good,
So
making up for lost time.
I'm telling you. So it's wonderful to have you both on board. And of course, I'll just run some questions out there for you, but please feel free to share and chime in as guided. You can kind of bounce the data back and forth with each other. But I'd like to know, first of all, how you all connected.
You mean connected with this book, or
How did you actually meet?
Oh, well, we, from a perspective of Laura, has been a student of metaphysics, and I founded a school called the AUM Esoteric Study Center, which was the first school of its kind in the United States to get state approval to give certificates in the area of religious metaphysics, the occult sciences, and other esoteric things. And so she fortunately comes from a family that is a military family. And because of that, in my previous incarnations, I lost my life in several wars, especially dealing with the United States of America. And she understood my love for this country, its flag, its symbols, and she's a lot more intelligent than I am. I got to tell you this. I've got to tell you this. This is important if you want to ask the question. I think it's when I had a lot of growing up to do. I was a patriarch. Went back there up to college, through college. I believed that human men, of course, were far more intelligent than women. And I got the shock of my life when, once upon a time, the governor, actually our to-be governor and our to-be mayor, who was running for office, was running up against someone who was involved with organized crime and drugs. And these people came to me and said, and this was a black man that he was running against, and they said to me, "We're going to lose this election, Bob. And we've seen your murals at Johns Hopkins University. We realize that with your mural, The Apocalypse, you have some insight into what's going to happen to this country in the years to come. So we have faith in you to do a poster for us for the mayor." So I did. I asked them, "Look, can I do what I want?" And they said, "Of course." I said, "Okay." And I did a poster of Aquarius pouring down the energies to various goddesses and gods of ancient Egypt. Now, you don't see posters like this in the city of Baltimore, especially on the esoteric side. And the mayor won by a landslide. He came to me and said, "Bob, you saved my ass. So, what do you want?" And I said, "This is what I want. I want to know how you became so successful. What is your secret? Because I see how you operate and the people behind you." And they said, "It's simple. All you got to do is surround yourself with intelligent women, especially women that are more intelligent than you are. And with that, they will look out for you. They will have insight into what and how to do things in compromise so that you do not make rash statements that you cannot fulfill. And he was absolutely right. So literally, almost all of the people that I work with and search for, even when I do murals, because I do murals, the Apocalypse mural is 2,700 square feet in a very conservative university, and it tells the story of how corporate structures have taken over the United States. That was in 1968.
Wow.
So Hopkins asked me to restore that mural just last year, and it is interesting because as they see it, they said, Hieronimus, you know what you did? You told us in 1968 that the media would do what's doing. They warned me about also certain media that was really more patriarchal than ever, like Fox Television, Fox Network. And they said, you told the story of the 99% being taken over by the 1%. And now we understand your work, and congratulations. And so Laura is far more intelligent than I am.
Well, could I butt in here?
Go right ahead.
I just want to give you a more succinct answer to the question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, but you asked me.
I met him right out of college, and I was at that stage of where am I, what am I supposed to do, who am I, everybody goes through that. And I met him and his wife, Zohara, who's a very powerful woman, and they were running she had just founded the Ruscombe Mansion Holistic Healing Center, which is a collective of healers here in Baltimore. And I joined them there and began working for them there, and then began my life of reading. They had this immense library, and it's just grown since I've known them, which was based on the old AUM Esoteric Study Center, which Bob mentioned, which was the only state-approved college in the school in the country that was giving out certificates in religious metaphysics and so forth. So it made headlines all over the world. This was very intriguing to me. And then soon after that, they founded 21st Century Radio, which is almost on the air 30 years. Can you believe that, Bob? 21stCenturyRadio.com if you want to check it out. We've been doing interviews on the paranormal and the unexplained and expanded consciousness and ancient history ever since UFOs, paranormal, the whole bit. So then I started to help him write his books. So we were researching Founding Fathers' secret societies together and United Symbolism America, and I finally got to put that English degree to work and have written several books. We did the Yellow Submarine together, and that's basically the story of our collaboration. I'm working for both Zoe and for Bob and growing and learning ever since.
What an excellent combination both of you make, I must say. Yeah, it's really nice to have you on tonight. And it's very interesting. This is a tipping point right now here on the timeline, what Bob was saying. I'm very concerned about the fate of our country right now, so maybe we can go into levels of that. It just seems like things are very, very serious. And I was mentioning prior, and I don't know if you caught it because I was having such a hard time getting you all on board live, but I was mentioning how we're at a crossroads and that this is a very serious time, and especially with the propaganda happening here in media. It's just out of control. So it's interesting, Bob, because you did predict a lot insofar as what you were perceiving and reading. And so, the symbolism also, I believe there's a lot happening here on multiple levels, but we can go into that level if you like. But I also want to dive into your book now, The Secret Life of Lady Liberty and the Goddess in the New World. What a beautiful title. And for me, because I come from a background of mysticism and the craft, to me, the goddess is a very, very powerful force. Now, how did you come about that specific title?
Oh, that's an interesting story. This isn't the book we set out to write, actually. We thought we were going to write something quite small and simple, more of an expansion on a chapter we did in United Symbolism of America, which was one chapter on different symbols, and one of them happened to be the Statue of Liberty. So we took the idea to the publisher and said we would like to decipher her symbolism, the torch and the tablet and the chains and the radiant crown of light, and maybe talk about some of the symbols of liberty as a female that came before the Statue of Liberty. That went up in 1886, so there were lots of different versions of the Liberty Goddess that preceded her, including Indian versions, Native American versions. And they said, well, that sounds interesting enough, but we'd really like you to look at the Statue of Liberty from a new perspective as a goddess in the New World. They're the ones that came up with that concept. And so to really think about her as a goddess, it took us a lot longer. We needed to do a whole new education on the goddess worshiping cultures, and we read all of Maria Gimbutas's work and Rianne Eisler and people that followed her, and got a good crash course in the history of the matrifocal cultures, those who saw the deity as a partnership, that the earth was the life-giving creator force, and there was there was a male and a female partnership in the divinity and in the culture. So we started to look specifically for different depictions of the female in divine form in the New World, which is another term that's a little bit controversial because the Native Americans don't consider it new, and it sort of implies that the old was more civilized and the new was more wild. But in any case, there are other depictions because, especially in the Native Americans along the northeastern continent of the continent where the European colonials contacted them, they were matrilineal as well, and they gave their women, or they considered their women, on equal par as far as intellectual capacity for one, spiritual capacity for another, and healing. And they were partnership societies. So we look at the different versions of the goddess in the New World and the goddess in the Old World, and see what we're trying to do is see the Statue of Liberty as a goddess. I figure listeners to a show called The Witching Hour should understand that already, but most Americans don't. They just consider it an it, and we consistently refer to her on purpose as a her, as a she, because she is a goddess. She is a depiction of the female divine, and she is also the symbol that most Americans identify with. I think we kind of have created a mother goddess image out of her, subconsciously, if not consciously. Not what she was intended to represent, but nevertheless, she's become the mother of exiles, thanks to that poem. And around the world, people see that image and they think America. I think it's more of a unifying, energizing symbol than even the flag or any other patriot symbols that were associated with the revolution itself. So what we're trying to do is accept the Statue of Liberty as our American goddess, and that would help us acknowledge the divine female as part of the American tradition. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, recognizing the goddess, as you obviously know, we recognize life as sacred, and we have a responsibility to keep it that way. So if we can embrace the Statue of Liberty as a goddess, perhaps some of that can rub off on our American identity. Mm-hmm. That's our idea.
I think it's a perfect idea. And Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I got a lot to add to
that. Go ahead.
Never at a loss.
Most importantly, I am, Laura is brilliant.
Well,
yeah, I know. But, the intuitive mind is so much faster than the intellect. And if you have an IQ like she does, above 150, 160, and you put that together with great intuition, then you can move very rapidly, and that's the reason why we are so proud of our bibliography. It's a 17-page bibliography, fully scholarly work with some of the greatest scholars on the planet. Every book in it has been read. Every book has been used. And when you stand on the shoulders of some of the greatest, especially women scholars in the world, then you can't lose, and because they back up each other on many different levels. As you know, when you study, especially when you do your doctoral works and masters and all that other kind of thing, you literally are standing on the shoulders of other researchers. So, excuse me, there are a lot of books that talk about the Statue of Liberty, but there is nothing like this book.
None of them are like this book.
None of them. This is going to be a book that was going to take us 2 years to do. And when we found out how much more we had to learn, it meant that the murals that I was doing, in 2013, I was doing a mural called We the People. It had 3 goddesses in it, and was introducing the concept of the League of the Iroquois Indians and their influence upon the founding fathers of America. And even though I've done dozens of shows, on television shows with the History, Discovery, National Geographic, but my work is better known in Europe, Russia, Germany, Japan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because they are more scholarly works over there. So it's not just the bibliography in words, it's the visuals. There are over 100 different images, some seldom seen in the world. And we didn't bump into them by accident. It took a long time to find them and then get permission to do them.
That's why most books don't have a lot of illustrations.
That's right.
It takes a lot of time. And by the way, almost all of them are listed at our website, which is just secretlifeofladyliberty.com. We have an extensive gallery there of our, you can see the Indian Queen and the Indian Princess, which are predecessors to the Statue of Liberty, different depictions of the American Liberty Goddess that were also based on Libertas, that Roman goddess that the Statue of Liberty is clearly based upon.
Mm-hmm.
What did you like about the book, Solaris? I'm interested.
Well, to me, it's a representation, and I look at it as divine goddess energy. And so far as the way you're interpolating the data reminds me of what I would consider to be like the star goddess, insofar as the representation of what's hidden behind the scenes, and also what the signature is behind this country in general. Because in my opinion, it goes way beyond the linear world. So what I see is the divine feminine. I see a lot of divine feminine, and what you were touching on earlier is the protecting, the protector, the creator, preservation, and destruction. But at the same time, this is the guardian of worlds. And to me, that was a representation of acknowledging through the Statue of Liberty to some degree what we are as a country. And also the light. I know the torch means many, many things. It depends on where your state of consciousness is. But for me, the light is illumination of spirit. I mean, the torch can be so many things: a guide, a beacon to the higher states of awareness. I think that this country, this beautiful land, America, has been it's very, very special. I believe it's very, very special. And this is what makes me very sad that's going on in the timeline right now, because we're in critical, we're at a point now where things can I believe can get very, very bad very quickly. So, but to me, that was the main thing that hit me, because my connection to divine goddess energy, and also because I'm seeing a war on the divine goddess, a war on the divine feminine right now, in the illusion of the timeline. There seems to be a lot of spiking up and oppression towards that. Now, what is your impression of what you've perceived?
There's absolute war against women. The Republican Party is responsible for that.
And the goddess.
And has been. Yes, they have been attacking the goddess, and because it goes back to the Bible, in which they see the woman has brought the curse of Satan to the planet, especially down there in Texas and other areas where women are having such a terrible time in having births that they do not die from. Texas leads the world in deaths of women. Women are just not considered almost human, and it's because of the extreme Christian intolerance. It's unfortunate that, there's the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's the Gnostic teachings, there's all these extremely important teachings, and they are at war with those. They don't even accept them. They don't accept the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Joseph, etc. All of that new knowledge, all that information from 1945 to 1947 with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls changed my life. I mean, I was going to be a priest at one time, but when I started asking questions about the Dead Sea Scrolls and what that meant in regards to the Christian teachings, I was up against a wall that I could not break down. That's the reason why I had to bail out. I could not possibly serve. It's the same time when I used to work for Fox Television, and then when I found out what was going on behind the scenes and the diminishment of women, I could not tolerate it. We couldn't. We just broke away. And fortunately, other avenues opened up. So, yes, we're in serious trouble. The divine feminine is in serious trouble. The planet, our mother, the goddess herself, and the earth is a goddess. The goddess is in such trouble that we are going to go through a period, as the Native Americans especially have told us. They look at the changes in the weather as being Mother Earth has had it. It's going to protect itself. It is going to flood our lands. It is going to set fires. It is going to eliminate massive numbers of people on our planet. You cannot keep flooding Houston. You can't keep flooding New Orleans. You can't keep flooding parts of Florida. You can't keep putting new beaches into all of these places. It's going to bankrupt the United States. It's going to bankrupt other countries. We are just going to lose land all around. So it's much worse. That's what the Apocalypse Mural also discusses. And I'm so happy that a university such as Johns Hopkins University has come to support that. You would not think that. It's a very conservative university. But what we have now, we have stories coming out, research coming out on the BBC. I have high regard for the BBC. I have high regard for the New York Times. And when they finally get to the point to discuss that America is no longer a democracy, it is an oligarchy. It is a series of numerous corporations of the billionaires that are in control. And this could only mean devastation to our planet. And certainly, unless you're extremely wealthy, you're not going to make it. Water is going to become so costly, clean water that we can drink. With all this fracking going on, it's destroying our good, clean water. With the continue to use coal the way we're doing, and to continue to use elements of the kind of engines that we're using, it's only going to make it much worse. Laura can certainly go into that in depth more than I can, because she's certainly on top of it. So you're right. We are in for a very serious shakeup, and we need the wisdom of the goddess. We need to touch our heart again and think with our heart and mind at the same time. It's been done back there in ancient Egypt. They had that ability. As many other, I know you know all about this, and I don't mean to bore you.
No, you're not. Are you kidding me? No, please, go ahead.
But the point I'm just making is that the earth is unprepared. One of the lovely things about our nation is that when there is a problem, when people get flooded out, we come to their aid, not just here, but the rest of the planet. Our nation founded a republic. Even though the Native Americans taught us a better republic, we didn't use the knowledge and wisdom, full wisdom of them. We are in such a situation that without the importance of bringing women into this situation, we are going to lose control, and that is going to lead to a great deal of misery. But without water, the only people that are going to afford clean water are people that are extremely wealthy. And unfortunately, they aren't paying attention to the people on the street, or the just ordinary middle-class people, or certainly below that. And if you do that, then it's not a civilization that will not be tolerated and will be brought down. So it's not just America, it's the rest of the planet. It's amazing to read in someone other's newspaper around the world, because my work is, as I said before, better known in other countries, that they have come to a conclusion that we are no longer a democracy, but an oligarchy run by corporate powers who are looking out for themselves, and all of the media, all of it, is complicit in this.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that too. Yeah,
There's only six big owners of the media across the world.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We're getting the same story from each one of them. That's telling we don't have the kind of variety that we need, or the in-depth kind of work. I'm sorry to take so long.
Oh no, you're not. No, that's why you're here. Go ahead. No, seriously.
This question of where we're headed is much worse than any American really believes today. You know the old story of Noah's Ark, which oh gosh, so many people. I remember when I was very young, and they would tell the story of Noah's Ark. The story kind of went, this guy named Noah said we were going to have a big flood, and it was coming, and you better prepare for it. And, of course, everyone laughed at him. They said, it's not possible. Now, it reminds me of the state of Florida, because of all the land masses that are really going to get it, is that tip of Florida down there is going to be wiped. Mm-hmm. Now, you're not even allowed to talk about that. Rubio down there would not allow discussions of that. If you stick your head in the sand and don't pay attention to it, it's going to be so much worse. And because the elderly down there are so many of them, they're going to suffer greatly. But that's not the only. All of our land masses, certainly up here in the Northeast, all of them are going to be changing, and for good reason. Mother Earth is going to take these lands. She's going to put them under salt water. They will be reborn and reused just like Atlantis, just like Lemuria, just like so many other lost civilizations. We lost them because they too warred with one another and messed up the environment. I'm sure you're aware of that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we don't learn that in our high schools, colleges, universities. We think that you only take it back 5,000 years. Well, the feminist culture goes back 35,000 years at least. It's been the last 5,000 years of male domination, the kind of domination that you see and believed in by the extremist Christians such as Sarah Palin and her teachers, and individuals who believe literally that women can be satanic and could be satanic more than men. Wow.
Well, they see any depiction of the divine in female form as satanic, because we've been conditioned in this Judeo-Christian society to believe that the divinity can only be expressed in the masculine, so that anything that looks outside of that, like a goddess, or even to many of these extremist type Christians, not all Christians, and there's, the true teachings of Jesus are quite beautiful and lovely, but we call them extremist Christians because they tend to think that their way is the only way and every other way needs to be not just suppressed but wiped out. So we find that there's a direct correlation between those who fear the goddess as satanic and those who are in favor of suppressing women's rights, because a powerful woman and a powerful female divinity, they're the same to them. So this is the group that, you may have heard this a couple of years ago, they put out a campaign to take down the Statue of Liberty. They call her the whore of Babylon. Oh. That figure that's in the book of Revelation that has been used by just about every Christian group to demonize just about every other Christian group, and Jews and pagans alike. So the whore of Babylon, I think that the biblical scholars have been able to determine it stands by the writer of Revelation for Rome, because Rome had just destroyed their home of Jerusalem. That's when that book was written, along with lots of other books of prophecy that were equally as weird, but that one is the only one that got into the Christian scriptures of the New Testament. But they were talking about Rome. That was their traditional enemy, and whenever they used the code word Babylon, that's what they meant. They couldn't talk about it outright as Rome because they would have gotten in trouble. They
would have been murdered.
They used a previous enemy that they had vanquished, and that's what that meant. So in any case, now they're calling the Statue of Liberty the whore of Babylon because she's a female divine figure, and they wanted to take down the other Statue of Liberty that's well known in the United States that's on top of the U.S. Capitol dome. It's technically called the Statue of Freedom, but she's another liberty goddess. And she's got a wonderful story on her own that we might get into later. But they wanted to take those down and replace them with the Christian cross and rename the District of Columbia, which of course is another goddess. Another earlier depiction of the American Liberty Goddess was named Columbia. Mm-hmm. And rename the D.C. as the District of Christ and make the Christ the ruler of the Constitution, because that's what they are interested in. They're interested in a theocracy, a monoculture, a top-down hierarchy where men are in control and women are subservient. They go for the one creation story in Genesis, not the earlier one, but the one about the rib that was added later, when the Jewish judges were trying to explain their exile in Babylon. Actually, it goes back to Babylon again, and they came up with this idea that it was because the Hebrews were worshiping the goddess from the surrounding Semitic cultures. Of course, there were Hebrew goddesses. Mm-hmm. Yahweh had a wife, or you can call it that in a sort of glib way. But there were loads of other female divinities amongst the early Hebrew peoples and the Canaanite peoples. There was Asherah and Astarte and all kinds of. They just accepted that. It was just an accepted common. Of course, you've got male, female in nature. You've got male, female in the sky, in the cosmos, in humanity. It didn't shift until right around that time. Nobody really knows why. There's lots of theories. The invention of the alphabet is one that I think is particularly interesting, since it sort of rewired the brain to become more literal and less conceptual, and therefore more linear and less whole-brained. So that either that helped allow in the other hordes that come from the Asian steppes, that brought their sky gods and their warrior cultures, take over the more maternal matrifocal goddess-worshipping cultures. But in any case, right around that time period, around the invention of writing, which we all in history class are told is the beginning of civilization, quote-unquote civilization, when this war sort of took over, this war domination paradigm took over, instead of the partnership paradigm. That's what Rian Eisler calls it. It was a time of partnership, and now we're in a time of domination. And that goes within societal in the way we treat each other, as well as the way we treat the earth, because, as Bob was saying, the earth was considered the mother goddess. That was what they saw as giving birth to all life. Obviously, there's sustenance, as well as taking you back at the end. So they created these sacred spaces of caves that were like a womb, and these giant Neolithic mounds that were like a breast, and then you go in them like you're going back into the womb. And these incredible alignments with the sun and the solar thing, so that you can tell it's a sacred site. Mm-hmm. So that's the culture that was wiped out. And when the myths changed, the myths that were written around that time, they when you can look at them from that perspective of a cultural shift, you can see what's happening is these older myths, like for example Athena, Minerva, is a much older goddess than the Greco-Roman canon that we're used to, and before Homer and Hesiod wrote about her in the new patriarchal way, she was with the Medusa. She was linked with the Medusa as a mother-daughter female pair, where the daughter almost becomes more powerful than the mother. It's an interesting story that you can trace back. So Minerva today is seen as a patriarchal kind of goddess. And I think that's why the revolutionary generation from the colonial time period, when they shifted away from Britain, they used a lot of goddess imagery when they were trying to create this revolution and inspire the English colonists, who still thought of themselves as English until this break, to re-identify themselves as Americans, as a new concept. So they came up with the Indian princess, and they just used a lot of goddess imagery to sort of give I don't think they did it consciously, but what they ended up doing was giving the people a mother figure. And Minerva was especially appealing to them as the father's daughter. Her story amongst the Greeks is she came right out of Zeus's head. She didn't have a mother. She does technically, but that's another story. And she's fully armored, so she's the armored goddess, and she's also the goddess of wisdom. She's got all these dichotomy in her being. She's the goddess of wisdom and the goddess of war, and she's the cool strategist and the one who thinks ahead and helps all the warriors on the battlefield to strategize how to best win. And that archetype has come down to us today, where in the feminist movement, as the women are coming out into the world of the 50s, 60s, 70s, they came out as Athena because they needed to be a man in a man's world. So they armored themselves. They were cold. They're often seen as shrewd and calculating, but they're also far-seeing and planning. And we would advocate that they need to get more in touch with their maternal side. And this is from the work of Jean Shinoda Bolen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. The Goddess is in Every Woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bestseller a couple of years ago. And she would say that women who identify too strongly with their Athena archetype need to become more familiar with their more vulnerable sides, like the Aphrodite, the Hestia and the hearth goddesses and so forth. So there's the Statue of Freedom over the Capitol Dome. She has Minerva's helmet. She was influenced quite a bit by the symbolism of Minerva.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's really, I love having this discussion with you, and I love listening to you talk here. I'd like to let you just flow with the energy because I know you know exactly where to go on the timeline, what we're talking about. But what you're discussing is very interesting because you're touching on, first of all, in my opinion, souls are androgynous, which means we're both male and female. So I could never understand the discrimination between sexism. In other words, why are women being treated a certain way when we're all male and female, we're all incarnated probably as men or women, and why is there this big problem here? And also, what comes to mind, what you were talking about with the control mechanisms associated with the Christianity. Also, I'm seeing that same thing with the Islamic extremism. I'm seeing that same thing where the women are treated horribly, the abuse,
even
the sexual,
harsher, much
sexual
harsher,
mutilation. I mean, damaging their chakras, damaging their sexual centers. This is deliberate mind control. It's fragmentation. I mean, I can go on so many levels of it. It's terrible. And of course, I'm seeing that parallel also. And another thing that comes to mind, the quote unquote, how they use the name ISIS, when in fact that's Isis, the goddess. Isis, a beautiful design. This is so offensive to me. I get so offended by that. I don't call them that. And
I do too. I'm the same way. I refuse to use that word.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. That is really key. I mean, because it is a way of mind control, pointing to, because that's what the extremist Christians hate. They hate ISIS. ISIS is their enemy. So when you name this group, I've forgotten their real name now. It's ISIS has been used so much.
Well, in Arabic, they're called Daesh, and I forget why, but they don't like to be called that. So that's the word I like to use.
Yeah.
And they're especially afraid of being killed by a woman. So there's a whole female Syrian army that they deliberately are joining up because they're women, and that makes those particular types of warriors even more afraid.
Go ladies.
It's all about suppression of the feminine.
Mm-hmm. Another excellent point you made deals with what is in the old days referred to as hermaphrodites.
Yeah, and
Hermes, Aphrodite, the balance between male and female, because the Statue of Liberty later on will touch on how it is in balance and its symbolism, because the greatest things about symbols, we don't have many good symbols anymore. They've been destroyed by the History Channel and all the other places that I've had. By the way, I have tried many times on the History Channel or Discovery to talk about the League of the Iroquois. They will not allow it. They just won't. And it's really sad. And that's the reason why I don't do shows along those lines anymore. Symbols are extremely important. They're forces that are within the psyche. Symbols are a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and they cultivate wholeness, which results in self-realization. And when a symbol contains both the conscious and unconscious elements, it can relate to the entire psychic system, and it is then assimilated in consciousness relatively quickly from the standpoint of, well, that's transpersonal and humanistic psychology. I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Carl Jung, etc., whereas the patriarchs love the work of Freud because of the especially in dealing with the penis envy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Down to that.
So what our culture, our society is in a very disintegrative state, and that's partially explained by our failure to create meaningful myths and symbols. If you watch the History Channel, they take down and cut to pieces our founding fathers one by one on some of the most important things that they accomplished, such as separation of church and state. That is the key to America. You must separate church and state. And that is not what the extremists want. The Puritans, and they are Puritans. And if you look at the history of Puritans, they end up burning a lot of women and children. It's amazing. Thousands of children along. Why burn up children?
Mm-hmm.
This is extraordinary. But you see this parading around of, wasn't it nice when we were Puritans? Well, when they were Puritans, You only had one belief. That was it. You had no choice of anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's an amazing concept for it to document. And of course, thank God, finally after about 1630, 1640, that particular culture disintegrated, because I don't know how many women it burned after that particular time. And this kind of thing can happen again, especially if individuals like the people dealing with Miss Palin and their folks get their hands on America's symbols, because it was her. Who was her preacher? Who was her priest?
I don't know his name.
A guy named Wright.
I don't know.
Anyway, they militarized children. You probably saw the.
You're talking about Jesus Camp.
The Jesus Camp. Children 4 and 5 years old. Brainwashing them into thinking it's time for you to go to war.
To be warriors.
Yes, be warriors, and having had no childhood whatsoever. What kind of people would do that? What kind of thinking does that? It's very sick.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it needed to be balanced. And you mentioned this. I mentioned Hermes, Aphrodite.
Mm-hmm.
There was, and now of course. Now we enter a part of history which is prehistory today, but most I'm certain you are aware of Atlantis. I'm sure you're
strong connection to that.
And Lemuria, because in Lemuria, if you go to the work of Dr. Rudolf Steiner, if you go to the work of H.B. Blavatsky especially, they will discuss a continent called Lemuria, and on Lemuria, and this was you're talking about tens of millions of years ago. You can't really give it a definite date, but it's tens of millions of years ago. Humans were not male or female. They were both. And it is interesting what's happening in our culture today with the final acceptance that there's more than one sex. There's multiple types of sexes, depending upon previous lifetimes and lessons that we got to learn. And back in Lemuria, somewhere they say around 20-some million years ago, the separation of the sexes took place, and that's what you had, the division that the male dominated in the intellect, the female dominated in the heart, and that gave us the balance. But before that, we had both, and we're moving again towards that. And I was so happy in recent years to see the freedom now given to people that have multiple different types of sexes. That's really mirrored also in the face of the Statue of Liberty. I was absolutely shocked when we went to go see up into the head of the Statue of Liberty to the museum. And if you take a look at the face, now this is in our book. I've forgotten which page it is, but they show you the face of the Statue of Liberty minus the crown and the hair and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot tell if it's a male or a female.
Right.
It is a balance, and that's what we really are about. That's what the Statue of Liberty is about. It's an alchemical, symbolic formula dealing with especially the Kabbalah that is all about balance. And the symbols that we use, because I mentioned earlier the importance of symbols. Every symbol has a minimum of 7 different levels. Some more than that, but the basic 7. If you study the works, any of the alchemical works, this number 7. Well, 7 is important for the cyclical aspect of it, but it's just unfortunate that this knowledge has become almost extinct. That's what the AUM Esoteric Study Center that I founded back there in 1969, right after Woodstock, it became extremely important because we wanted to reborn this information. You know, this is old knowledge, and I'm certain you're familiar with what that type of teaching is about, and balancing the heart and the mind. You can't have a dominant mind. You have a dominant mind, it'll take over the world. You have a dominant heart, things will fall apart. You know?
Right.
It's all about balance, right?
Yeah, it is. And we're born. I'm about 49% female and 51% male. And it's the same with every one of us. We've all had imbalance one way or the other, and it was so important that, especially in the last several years, that men and women have become free to be. If they're going to be homosexual, they can be homosexual. If they're going to have change their entire sex, that's allowed to do so. Why? Is because in previous lifetimes, I am certain that they needed things to work out, that they needed to work it out either in a physical body, male, or a female body to do it. Because I know I got a lot to do. I've worked in that. I mean, it's embarrassing to note just what a fool I was after college. In college, your ego gets kind of inflated, and you think you know everything there is. And
Well, to his defense, he was raised in the 40s and the 50s, so culture was conditioning you to believe that stupid women drivers and women are supposed to stay home and cook and clean for the men. So that was the image that you grew up with. And as far as the Statue of Liberty and her androgyny, I'll just jump in here while I'm going. And a lot of people will tell you that the face is modeled after the sculptor's mother, the sculptor Auguste Bartholdi. Was definitely a mama's boy, and there's a wonderful metaphor that can be made through that story about the Statue of Liberty as a mother. We were trying to liken her to a mother figure earlier. There's a lot of holes in that story. It's something he never denied, but it's something he never said outright himself either. And there's extensive correspondence between mother and son, and it's never mentioned. A sitting is never mentioned. There's no models or anything. So another interesting theory, though, was the true father of the Statue of Liberty is a man that doesn't get mentioned very often. His name was Edouard de la Boulaye, and he was Bartholdi's mentor. He was a legal scholar and a fan of American history. He was just in love with Benjamin Franklin. He wrote the first history of the American Republic that was published in France, and his students just loved to hear him lecture on the Republic of America and how it was their ideal, as France's political situation was just going up and down and up and down. Every 20 years or so, they had another revolution. They would have a monarchy, and then they'd have anarchy, and then they'd have another attempt at a republic, and it just kept getting thrown over. So there was no stability. And La Boulay's crowd, this was around the middle of the 1800s, were very enamored of the U.S. Constitution, and that's what they wanted to establish in France, something very similar, a republic where citizens had the right to vote, rather than a monarchy where they were just told what to do. So it was his ideas to do the Statue of Liberty, and it took a long time to raise the funds. And meanwhile, Bartholdi created a bust of La Boulaye. That's how he made his money. He made busts and statues of famous men. And you can compare the face of La Boulaye next to that mask that Bob was talking about that is so jarring. When you see the Statue of Liberty's face without her hair, it really looks like a mask, and it's
and Laura,
got coming up.
Yeah, we're going to have a break. Hold that thought for a second here. Everybody, please
Gotcha.
stay tuned. You're listening to Ravenstar Switching Hour. I'm Solaris Blair with my excellent guests tonight. So wonderful to have them on board. We have Laura Cortner here, and I know I pronounced Bob's name right, Bob Hieronimus. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.